Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Touchpoints and Interfaces, Assessing How Disruptive Connectivity has Impacted the Fleet. This webinar is brought to you by Green Ship Technology and Shipping 2030. My name is Dita Kelsey and I will be your moderator today. In a moment, I will be turning things over to our speakers, but first let me explain how you can get the most out of this event. To improve your viewing and listening experience, you can move your webcast windows around by dragging on the title bar or resize them by clicking on their lower right corner. At the bottom of the screen, you will find multiple application widgets. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the green resource list widget. We welcome questions about our topic and will answer as many as we can following the presentation, but feel free to submit yours to the queue at any time. Just type it into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen and hit the submit button. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. So with that, let me introduce today's speakers. We have a really exciting lineup for you today. We have Klaus Braun-Egberg from AP Moller-Maersk. He is the Head of Mobility and Connectivity. And we also have with us Stephen Conley, who is the Maritime Market Segment Lead at SES Networks. You can find more information about our speakers by clicking on the speaker bio widget at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, let's get started. So first of all, if I could ask each of you, and perhaps Klaus will start with you in terms of what your background is, just for about 30 seconds to give us an overview of your experience thus far in the industry.
Sure, thanks. I'll try to do that. Hey, my name is Klaus. I'm working with Maersk as introduced, and my responsibility is mobility and connectivity. And connectivity in the context of this webinar here is all our connectivity, meaning SATCOM and cellular connectivity for the whole fleet falls under my responsibility. So that's the quick intro.
Great. And Stephen, if you wouldn't mind doing the same for our listeners.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Conley. I'm with SES Networks as a Maritime Market Segment Lead. So part of my responsibilities is really to advocate the end user requirements in the maritime market in general, and with particular focus on sort of commercial shipping. My background is very much in satellite communications. So I've worked for several of the largest connectivity providers and satellite operators globally, and traveled around the world a little bit with that. I have a background in fishing, so have spent some time offshore in my younger years. So I have a sort of vested interest in the maritime connectivity field.
Okay, perfect. So could I just understand, if we could start off first of all, excuse me, Klaus, from your point of view, you know, you're one of the first movers and shakers in this industry as a company, to kind of lead on digital disruption and integrate kind of new innovation of what's going on in the industry. What is your view and your take on your experiences as an overview thus far of connectivity technology? How is it? What are the kind of the initial impressions that you've got from that?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but I believe that we started out some 6-7 years ago to transform our fleet into using, let's say, higher bandwidth cellular SATCOM solutions, where we usually before that were mainly using, let's say, low bandwidth solutions for basic business needs. We transformed 5-6 years ago to using the let's say higher bandwidth SATCOM solutions, and is actually right now in the conversion of moving to what we call future connectivity. So I see that a great evolution is happening in the industry right now, but I also foresee that there's a lot of interesting things coming in the coming years with new SATCOM technologies coming up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I suppose, Stephen, on the flip side, you come from the converse side in terms of you being one of the providers of this technology. What's your view on the uptake of satellite communication and connectivity technologies from your point of view?
So I think satellite plays a vital role in the whole ecosystem. I don't think it's there on its own. So there's a lot involved in connectivity. I think, as Klaus sort of referred to, there's a lot more than just the satellite. But for us, being focused on satellite-enabled networks is kind of our main game, and providing real sort of enterprise-grade managed connectivity services, so that we can really enable commercial shipping companies to migrate to new operational models and thrive on the digital innovation that's happening around us. I think SES Networks have been particularly, I would say, disruptive in a way, in that we've sort of invested in a new form of satellite communications. So we have dual orbit, which is very much unique in the market. We really sort of thrive on interoperational ability between different satellite constellations and indeed terrestrial infrastructure, so that we can basically work with our channel partners to help them really focus on application-based disruption that may actually help the maritime industry sort of realize the benefits of digital revolution.
Okay, and I mean, it's interesting, the word, I suppose it's a buzzword in the industry in terms of being better connected. As someone that kind of is on the peripheral, so researching this from a third-party perspective, the term disruptive connectivity or being better connected, to me, would indicate kind of that ship-to-shore connection, but I think it goes so much beyond that. What are your, if someone were to ask you to define, what in your mind or your view, what is disruptive connectivity in the kind of the wake of the fourth industrial revolution and new digital disruption, what would be your thoughts to that question? And Stephen, if we could start with you.
Certainly, I think we've seen a massive uptake in the capability of connectivity at sea, quite frankly. So that in itself, for me, is quite a disruptor. So we've seen a doubling in the size of VSAT networks for mariners. We've seen factors of 10x sort of throughput going to single vessels over the past couple of years alone. So really, it's what do we do with that capability? I think on the satellite side, we've been innovating, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of different constellations, high throughput satellites, and all this sort of nice new technology. But it's really the bringing of everything together so that it actually has some sort of a return that's actually going to. That's when we're going to realize the disruptive effect of increased connectivity capabilities.
And Klaus, a similar question to you, and if someone were to kind of come up to you and say, right, disruptive connectivity, can you explain that to you? I suppose, I don't know whether you'd have a different point of view given the role and the job role that you have, but what would be your thoughts around that?
Yes, I would say that maybe I don't see let's say the connectivity as such being disrupted over the past couple of years or the last 5 years. To me, it's more an evolution that follows the same trend as you see in terrestrial-based cellular networks. You get a higher quality, you get a higher bandwidth at a lower cost. So is that a disruption or not? I'm actually not sure. To me, it's more an expected evolution of the area. If the disruption should happen in this let's say context here, I would rather say that it's new way of providing connectivity. Today we are very much focused on the let's say the high throughput bandwidth satellites in the KU and Ka bands, where what's going to happen with the lower orbit constellations that are being put up in these years? I more see that as a disruptive or potential disruptive technologies, or how can terrestrial networks extend into the let's say ocean region. We have performed analysis in our network, and our vessels, they are actually within reach of cellular networks around 50-60% of the time during a sea voyage. So could that be an enabler or a disruptor in this area?
I mean, it's interesting that you've mentioned that, and actually, Stephen, something that I'd like to pick up with you. You've talked about what the return of the disruptive effect is, and I suppose that as an industry, we always look for benchmarks or standards that we set ourselves to measure success of integration of these technologies. And I just want to understand from your perspective. Is it kind of coming up with a set of parameters to measure how effective these technologies, these connectivity technologies have worked? You talk about higher quality, improved bandwidth, but have you defined that set of parameters in which you work, or is that something that you're continuously improving upon?
Sure, I think it's something that still requires quite a lot of work, to be honest. In terms of real return on investment when it comes to connectivity, you really want to make sure that you're seeing some cost savings in terms of operational efficiencies or effectiveness. I think what we can measure perhaps from connectivity at sea is perhaps the more human aspect, where we actually talk to the crews on board these vessels. You know, I think there's been recent documentation. I think Mission to Seafarers Happiness Index is a good reference. They gave a survey to a vast number of seafarers, and they really found that scores of 8s and 9s and 10s out of 10, rather than much lower figures from previous surveys when they're asked about standards of connectivity so that they can be in touch with family and friends, for instance. That scratches the surface. I think that's becoming rather table stakes for the human aspect of employing people at sea. Over and above the basic connectivity, there's things that are enabled for crew welfare, such as training. You can do a whole lot more together. I think it's a vital piece of the overall connectivity play for shipping companies, and that return on investment could be measured as in crew retention or crew happiness, for instance. But in terms of operationally, I think we still need to do quite a bit of work on really how we enable all this new technology to really better the business. And I think Maersk are sort of leading the way in these kind of developments. So I'd be interested to hear Cosey's opinion on that also.
Yeah, I agree that the let's say connectivity is a super important item for our crew. They're away from home and they need to be connected with their families and friends and so forth. So of course it is a super important item, and our engagement surveys among all our seafarers also show that it is one of the most high-ranking items, just after good food on board the vessel. So internet access is super important. With respect to the business side of it, it's also an item for the crew retention side. The younger generations today, they expect this to be available 24/7 and in good quality and high bandwidth. So for sure, it is also, in my view, a differentiator going forward, that you can actually provide good crew welfare options for the crew. From the business side of it, I also agree that there is still an element of uptake here. The majority of our bandwidth, I believe, more than 90% is actually allocated for crew traffic. The remaining is only for business. So there's still a way to go.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you guys have touched upon that issue of crew welfare and connectivity. I used to personally have a lot more contact on the offshore side of things. And when it came to talking to seafarers that were on station on accommodation vessels, for them the most important thing was that internet connectivity, just giving them a sense of connection to their day-to-day life. So I think it's really interesting, but also one of the biggest priorities when it comes to enabling that that connection. I'd like to kind of move on slightly, and I suppose that as an industry, we're always looking at what are the lessons learned, and I'd like to understand, perhaps, Klaus, from your point of view, are there 2 or 3 kind of big lessons that you've learned when it comes to integrating connectivity technology in your fleet? You are, you're one of the first movers, as I said, of introducing this on board. So, what are kind of if you had to sum up in 2 to 3 key points or key takeaways, what would that be for you?
Well, I would say, first of all, the stakeholder management, that you need to make it pretty clear what does connectivity at sea means, because people are used to connectivity ashore, and it's two, let's say, non-comparable sizes. Mm-hmm. So you need to manage what you can actually, what are you able to deliver. And then secondly, on the, let's call it the user experience side of it, have good systems in place on board your vessels that can control the, let's say, the availability of connectivity. And I mean here that a system that can, let's say, provide fair usage policies for the seafarers, so that it's often talking about or mentioned as quota management, that each seafarer can manage their own, let's say, quotas, instead of everybody is trying to race for the same limited bandwidth. So that's 2 very important items. Mm-hmm. And then I believe it's important to talk to the seafarers, actually understanding what is it you want, what makes your life, your daily life good. Mm-hmm. And we've made quite some service with the seafarers, and believe that providing all kind of content in terms of news, movie, all kind of, let's say, value-added content would be of benefit. But it turns out that they want to, let's say, handle their content themselves. Mm-hmm. So the availability of high bandwidth and plenty of it is actually our main takeaway from this. Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, Stephen, kind of on the flip side to what Klaus is saying, from a supplier point of view, when you're dealing with your clients, what have you found have been the biggest challenges that they've faced to integrate this, and how have you helped them overcome those challenges?
So I think there's a lot of confusion often in the maritime marketplace when it comes to connectivity. Mm-hmm. There are some ambiguous offerings out there, really, and it takes often an expert to dissect what the offering actually ends up to mean. So I think what I would say is look for, when it comes to advice and choosing connectivity partners, I would say look for the transparency. Mm-hmm. So it's very clear, you understand the SLAs that are being offered and any limitations on that service. I would agree with Klaus that you need to have a well-managed service, so that indeed you can restrict or prioritize traffic and arrange the quality of service and filter things as required. Mm-hmm. And ultimately ensure that you have a partner who is scalable and flexible, because this market does change. You can assume only so much, really, when it comes to the maritime market and how it can be sort of volatile. Things can change. The routes that you assume your vessels to be taking might change over time. The least amount of sort of rearranging your satellite networks or connectivity networks, the better, really. So I'd say, partners who are flexible, scalable, transparent is very important, and obviously innovative in a way that they actually want to help the end user and understand their requirements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of the questions that we actually had come in prior to the discussion, and I suppose it kind of goes back slightly to what you were talking about in terms of making sure that the crew and that seafarers are fully on board. When it comes to the integration of that technology, Stephen, you mentioned it being flexible, being transparent, being scalable. But what about the kind of the training on the crew side of things when it comes to maintaining that connected system? Have you got any kind of experience in that area in terms of making sure that it's not just kind of command and control centres monitoring these networks, but also on the fleet, making sure that they've got the understanding, the skills and the know-how? Because as you said, the market is changing at a rapid rate due to general digital disruption. So I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts are on that aspect.
Sure. I think there are different strategies for different companies, but I think if I were to generalize, I would say that oftentimes people don't really want to be trained on the connectivity aspect. They don't really feel that they need to be offshore and thinking about connectivity or how to fix it if it may not work properly, for instance. So I would say that's very much a responsibility on those who are integrating the connectivity solutions onto vessels. These days, if you have a good connection, you have good out-of-band access to your vessels, there's a lot that can be done remotely, and basically there should be no requirement for for local folks they should be concentrating on what they're offshore to do, really, and the least of their worries should be to have to consider learning new technologies when it comes to RF and telecoms. So I would say that's something that is the job of us, really, and we should make that as seamless and transparent as possible, so that the end user really doesn't need to worry about it.
And Klaus, kind of same question to you from a training point of view. Be interested to understand what your perspective is on that issue.
Yeah, I believe it depends very much on the nature of your business or size of your business. If you're a smaller operator, vessel operator, you probably need, let's say, to outsource more. We also we operate a significant number of vessels, and obviously we have more resources in house to handle the let's say the IT aspects part of our solution. When it comes to the technology part of it, RF and so forth, I agree. It is something that is in the hand of the providers, that being the SATCOM providers directly or to third parties. So not much of a difference here, but I guess it depends on the size of your business, how much you want to in-house or outsource.
Okay. I'd just like to move on just a little bit, because connectivity between ships and shore, and making sure that your crew and your people have that right connection. But obviously the issue around data collection and reliance on connectivity networks to ensure the accuracy of this data, to ensure kind of real-time feedback of this. And I just wanted to, kind of understand from both of your point of views what your thoughts are around the implication or how connectivity technology has been able to perhaps enable faster connections, for more accurate data collection, for enhanced data usage, that's helping monitoring your fleet. So, Klaus, if I could start with you, and understand what your thoughts are behind that.
As if I look a few years back, we used our connectivity to, let's say, exchange emails with the vessel. Mm-hmm. So it was something that happened in absolutely non-real-time scenarios. We are right now running a big program around a connected vessel, mm-hmm. and it means that real-time data and providing, let's say, situational support to the vessel in real time is getting more and more critical. So the quality and the availability of the SATCOM systems actually becomes, if not critical, then absolutely high priority as other technical system on board the vessel. Mm-hmm. So it is a trend that we're trying to, let's say, support our vessels from shore, but it needs to happen proactively and not by, let's say, retrospectively. Mm-hmm. So the quality and the service is of increasing importance going forward. Okay. It's already today.
Okay, and Stephen, from someone that's working on the other side of that, what are your thoughts about what? I mean, maybe you could kind of give us an example of an example of how connectivity technology, what you guys do, has enabled that faster connection between providing data on a real-time basis.
Yeah, I think there are several examples of what we can do with real-time data. Mm-hmm. We always speak about vessel operational optimization, really improving vessel and fleet performance through real-time data transmission effectively. Mm-hmm. This might include monitoring fuel consumption, routing, navigation, engine health, anything down to things like the hull and the propeller optimization, for example. So all these things I think are very much at the forefront at the moment, particularly becoming increasingly important, I would say, with the IMO's 2020 sulfur cap coming up. Everybody's sort of looking into their own specific strategies about that. I'm not sure everyone fully understands the impact of low sulfur fuels when it comes to vessels or the performance of the scrubbers. So the vessel optimization is always critical, I would say. From an SES Networks perspective, we believe in forging partnerships between satellite comms providers and ship owners, operators, and together working to unlock these sort of application sets to help enable the proper, analysis, I would say, of satellite data to predict performance and drive operational efficiency. Mm-hmm.
And I suppose as well, gentlemen, that there is so much of a focus on now providing or almost anticipating a vessel's performance. So, this connectivity technology becomes a crucial component if it isn't already. I suppose, though, some people might argue that communications between ships and shore have always existed. So what kind of are the additional advantages that connectivity technology can provide? I mean, Klaus, you already talked about that before all of this, you're already exchanging emails between land and ship. So I'm just wondering or understanding, what are the enhanced or the layers upon what we already had as an infrastructure that connectivity technology is able to deliver?
Yeah, adding to what I mentioned before about being able to support the vessels in real time. A very few in the industry are talking about how do we serve our customers best possible. we are obviously transporting a lot of the cargo for our customers, and they actually they expect that they basically in real time also have access to information about their cargo and whereabouts of their containers while they're being on board the vessel. Of course, it's our responsibility, but that's not good enough anymore. We need to be able to provide that visibility and transparency to our customers, meaning that we took a decision some years ago that all our vessels would be enabled with cellular technology, so that we could be able to pick up data from all our reefer containers on board the vessels and transport that back to shore in close to real time, so that our customers could understand how is our cargo treated while being transported by Maersk. Will that increase to the dry cargo containers or other equipment on board? Yes, I believe it will. So that's another aspect of why is it important that we get better connected. Crew is important. The operational performance of the vessel is important, but I foresee that the next generation of how do we support our customers and deliver that let's say seamless end-to-end experience is an increasingly importance as well.
But so Klaus, can I understand from your point of view, we talk about we're moving towards things as tracking cargo in real time. Obviously, there are examples of that going on right now in the industry, but who are the stakeholders that need to be involved in that? Because I think that often, we identify a couple of the main parties. So, it would be you guys, it would be the people providing these connections. But in your opinion, who are the stakeholders that need to be involved to deliver that information and ensure that you are delivering upon, customer expectations of delivering that cargo on time?
Yeah, first of all, it's a discussion between us and our customers. What do they need in order to optimize their business, and that's what we are going to deliver. But it also means that we need to translate these requirements into how should our performance of these systems be. So to me, it's actually quite important that we as a ship owner understand how these systems, let's say, work and what are their limitations. And that is one of the reasons why we have, let's say, increased or enhanced our experience, a competence level in this area, because it is a critical factor to understand what we can, let's say, take out of the connectivity solutions and where they, let's say, cannot support us.
Okay. Stephen, I just want to mention something that obviously is at the forefront of everybody's mind now, and it's the kind of the security of information and the risk of threats when it comes to cybersecurity. And I just want to understand from your perspective, and perhaps maybe from your experience as well, what your thoughts around safeguarding these connections, these networks together, to protect from those that wish to disrupt on a negative ground.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important consideration for everybody, really, not just in maritime, but anybody who's relying on sort of digital connectivity for any part of their business operations. It's quite frankly something that we as a sort of network provider and satellite operator we've had this challenge for many years. Quite honestly, we have a massive team internally who deal with this on a day-to-day basis as their primary job, to make sure that they're protecting our satellite networks from cyber attack of any form. So I think it's recently been very public in the maritime industry, only recently, but to be honest, it's a factor that's been around for quite a long time. So yeah, I think we do have some lessons learned on that, and I think we do pass those down to our providers, our partners in the value chain. And of course, at an end user level, I think there's an important aspect just to follow basic procedures and make sure that people are trained and aware of the risk of cybersecurity. I think a lot of it is a mindset, and following best practices can be a first line of defence. By no means is it the only line of defence, for sure. So, you know, ensuring that your connectivity providers are focused on security and, you know, transparent again about their defences against that is, you know, something that should always be taken into account. It can cause catastrophic effects, as we've seen in recent years. Okay.
And Klaus, I suppose I'm not sure how much you can speak on this, but, you know, Maersk had a very public association with something that happened with you, and I'm just wondering if there's any kind of key takeaways that you would advise to any owner operator in that position. What would be your piece of advice in terms of safeguarding those connections and making sure that you're operating as, you know, safely but as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, I would say that we have done our lessons. Now, first of all, what we experienced here a little bit more than a year ago was not an attack in our vessel networks as such, but it replicated to our infrastructure. But of course, to me, the cybersecurity part and protection of same is of course essential, and it's like a given. It must be in there. But how do you protect yourself? I think it's driven by let's say internal requirements, and again, it depends a little bit on the size of your business and where you are and whether you are, how connected you are. But of course, it is essential that you understand how it can impact you and what you can do to mitigate it or to prevent it. You can never, let's say, run 100% safe operation, but you need to understand that what is the impact if things should happen, and how can you actually restore your systems in a safe and fast manner. But being completely protected is impossible. And then I think there's a big element around training your crew or your personnel in general, because the best safety can be compromised by unsafe behavior.
So, I mean, I suppose we're kind of coming to the end of our discussion, gentlemen, and I just want to kind of wrap up on a couple of different questions. We talk so much about kind of lessons learned, and I just want to understand, what is the one takeaway from your time and your experience when it comes to satellite communication to enhance connectivity? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give as kind of an operational piece that people can take away from this?
Yeah, I can add a few comments to that. I would say build in flexibility in your solutions and make sure that you have a contract that can be benchmarked and adjusted as you go along, because requirements and needs, they change rapidly, and the same does the offerings in the market. So don't lock yourself up, but be flexible so that you can move and pick up the evolutions that are happening.
And Stephen, same question?
Yeah, I think I'd pretty much back that up. So make sure you have comfort in your partners in the ecosystem. Lean on them, use them, feed them information, and make sure that they're deeply involved with your ambition when it comes to the digital strategy. I think it's a partnership, and everybody needs to understand what the end goal is. So I think transparency, openness, and banking on a very scalable, flexible system, with the proper global service capability is vital.
Okay, and final question to you both. There's been so much development when it comes to technology in general, but in particularly in particular, connectivity technology. And I just want to kind of almost look ahead as we end this. What do you think is the future, or what are the new expectations that you think are going to arise from, more efficient, more connected systems, people and ships? Stephen, if we start with you, maybe.
Sure. I think there's definitely an argument for future automation. I wouldn't say full autonomy, but more automation, certainly. Satellite-wise, we are already ahead of the game when it comes to SES Networks. So we've been operating lower Earth constellations for well over 10 years now with the MEO fleet that we have in our O3B product. Mm-hmm. We've got a next generation of O3B power satellites coming, which is a very sort of exciting new satellite system that brings cloud scale reach and capacity with thousands of flexible endpoints, which is a completely sort of different take on the traditional satellite game. This in cooperation with a sort of global our global fleet, which is already in excess of 70 satellites, is enabling a real future-proof capability to support this kind of, I guess, innovation and exciting trend of digitalization, let's say, when it comes to automation and really demanding these high throughput connectivity links. We're certainly looking far into the future when it comes to that. So I do see a lot of innovation, and I think already in the last 5 or 10 years the sort of jump in connectivity has already been quite dramatic. I think it still lags massively behind land-based connectivity, but we're absolutely getting there. We're seeing some tremendous throughputs and levels of stability and low latency that have been rather unprecedented in the past.
Mm-hmm. And Klaus, same question to you. What do you think what are you anticipating in the future when it comes to connectivity?
Yeah, what I expect from a very basic point of view is, to be blunt, higher capacity, higher bandwidth at a lower cost. And how will that be enabled? I believe it will be enabled if you look at the trends in the mobile industry, cellular, land-based. Now on the Satcom side, new constellations are being put up in the LEO and MEO bands or orbits. And the capacity in the Ka and Ku band is also increasing. A lot of real estate is actually being put in the sky in these years. So I expect that development to continue, and I look forward to it. I also foresee that the consolidation in the industry will still continue. There's still room for more consolidation, which will benefit for both for the Satcom operators as well as for the end users. So I see good prospects. There's still a way to go to hit the land-based. Whether we'll ever do it, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. But we're definitely on the right path. Okay.
All right. Well, listen, I think we've run out of time. Just a reminder, any questions that have been submitted that we haven't managed to cover today, we will be sending to Stephen and Klaus post the broadcast, so we'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions. I'd like to thank you both, Klaus and Stephen. It's been an excellent discussion. As with any of these, we always kind of scratch the surface, and I'm sure that there are a million follow-ups that we'd like to do. Thank you so much for your time, for outstanding insights today. As a reminder, if you receive a follow-up email, please note that this will include a link to view a recording of today's panel discussion. So if you found this event useful, please share it with your colleagues. We've also included the link to the Digital Week webinar series in the resource list widget, so please be sure to click on the link to register for other events in the series. Once you leave this webinar, a short survey will pop up in your browser window. We'd really appreciate it if you would share your feedback on this event, as it helps us to provide you with content most interesting for you. So on that, thank you to Klaus and Stephen once again. Thank you for listening. And on behalf of Connect 365 Maritime, have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.